Siwe mama say, opa namaye. Siwe mama say, opa namaye. Siwe.
Turn this on.
It should be at the bottom, right in the middle. Yep, that little white
Oh,
button.
What one?
Keep going in the middle. It says record.
Oh. Record in the cloud, right? You guys do the cloud.
Is it the cloud?
Yeah. You
Chris,
gotta,
is it the
Recording in
cloud?
progress.
you
There
gotta
we
do the
go.
cloud, because it won't.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy.
It should go straight to Julie. The cloud.
Julie's in the cloud? Is that what you just said?
It'll go straight to her. She'll get an email.
Cool. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Time being 5:33, I would like to call the March 1st, 2023 meeting of the Economic Development Subcommittee Steering Committee for the Franklin for All project to order. With us tonight on Zoom is Bruce Hunchard, the Zoning Board of Appeals Chair, and Councilor Kobe Frangillo. In chambers is Patrick Sheridan, Glenn Jones, Beth Wheeling, and Greg Rondo. So all citizens are welcome to attend public board and committee meetings in person. Additionally, in an effort to maximize citizen engagement opportunities, citizens will be able to continue to participate remotely via phone or Zoom. The meetings will also be live streamed by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast Channel 11 and Verizon Channel 29. If you would like to call in and ask a question, the phone number is 1-929-205-6099. I feel like I should have that memorized by now. And the meeting ID number is 828-7235-3198, then press pound. The link for the Zoom is on the agenda on the town website. And tonight, we are all here to continue our conversation on accessory dwelling units. And our wonderful town staff has put together some legislation for us to discuss. So do we want to go to you, Jamie, or do we want to go to our panelists in front of us?
Definitely want to go to the panelists in front of you.
Okay, who wants to go first?
I'm gonna defer to Amy to begin with. She's taken a lead on the ADUs issues. The memo we put together, but I think I'd like her to take the lead on it for tonight.
Excellent, thank you, Brian. Okay, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. So what we put together right now in front of you is kind of a memo providing you an overview of what accessory dwelling units are, what the current permitting process is for the town, and then some proposed optional changes towards our zoning bylaw. One of the things that the current bylaw does not have is a definition for accessory dwelling unit. So we've proposed here a draft of a definition for what the accessory dwelling unit would be. Then secondly, in our use regulation schedule, there were no actual use for it. It fell under two-family, so we're proposing to add the use under the attachment 7 schedule for accessory dwelling unit. And for discussion for the EDC, we've kept it special permit in several of the zones. The zones that we have allowed by right, that's because currently the two-family were allowed by right in those zones. So we kept it that way. But all discussion for the EDC to go through. There is some zoning actually in place, Chapter 185-19B in our zoning that provides basically some rules that they have to follow for accessory dwelling units. So those do currently exist. So when referring to this current accessory dwelling unit, these rules would apply to them. Some of the other items, if they want to think of putting further restrictions on ADUs or identifying ADUs, or some ideas of requiring separate utilities, maybe some parking requirements. Other towns we've seen has set a size limit, maybe maxing out at like 800 or 950 square feet. We've seen that in other towns, and then lot size. So that's what we've put together.
Okay, thank you. I think what I would like to do is just take this one piece at a time and go back to the accessory dwelling unit definition. And so I'd like to see what people think about that, if we should add anything, is it okay? And so I'm going to open it up to the committee for any kind of comments. Beth?
Thank you. I guess my question is whether our definition can include something along the lines of what is in the state's 48 definitions, chapter 48, section 1A definitions regarding size of the units. I think that most of our definition seems to be in line with the state's definition, except for the fact that they have a provision that indicates is not larger in floor area than half the floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. That would be my opinion on whether we limit the size or have no restrictions on that.
So it was not more than half or less than 900. Oh, it's like, so, but, okay, so, but you said you don't know if we should add it in or we should add it in. Is that what you think?
I feel we should add.
You think we should? You think we should restrict it?
I do, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Does anyone else? Greg?
Just to Beth's point, I actually had a note. Do you do the ADU based on the proportionate size of the existing structure in the lot? What can accept it? And I'm not sure if that's even out there still or feasible. Do it proportionately, so that way that you don't have a large unit in a small neighborhood. You do proportionate what's there. Just a thought.
So, but okay, all right, so I understand.
60,000 square foot lot.
Yeah,
You do it based on the 60,000 square foot lot with the house on it, so say you have a 3,000 square foot house, you just do a proportion to two. So that way that you don't have a massive structure in a small tight little lot, that's all. But limiting the size could be detrimental to an in-law or families out in, an 8-acre zone is really what it breaks down to. So you want to do an in-law apartment for your parents. And you wanted to make it a little bit bigger, and it's all one level because you're in wheelchairs or whatever it may be. You may need that extra square footage in order to make it happen, that's all.
okay. That's a good thing to think about because, like, I think, like, well, like, my house is really small, and if I wanted, what if I needed to put something in, an ADU in that was big, a little bit bigger because it's just tiny, right? So is there, so that would be one, I don't know. It's just like one of those things we think about, like what really makes sense. Beth, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I guess just some of Greg's points I completely agree with. And I think it goes beyond their definition, so if we're trying to focus just on the
Yeah,
definition.
just on the definition.
Then I will wait until we talk about other areas, so.
Okay, so is there a place to put this that's not in the definition? And I think I'm going to go to, can I go to Brian? He doesn't want to talk, but I'm going to make him talk.
I'm thinking leave it in the definition, because if somebody's coming in looking for it, it's in black and white, they don't have to go looking for it.
Okay.
It's initially right there in front of them.
Right.
So they don't have to weed their way through the waters to find out if
Right,
it's even
no.
feasible.
No tables or anything. just-
Exactly.
It's right. in the
Right.
definition.
Right.
Yeah, it could be right in your definition, limit the size, or it can be in one of the used, the used dimensional tables, whatever, throw it in there. So it could be under the residential use table, that where we're gonna add in the line, you could have a note, I love those notes, right?
350
But-
notes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I think, I don't think it matters too much, but,
Okay.
it's, the definition, what I would like to see is a definition that we don't have to change if we say, oh, we want to change the size. Well, why change the definition? Change the note, for instance. But It doesn't really matter. It equals the same thing in the end.
Okay. Glenn, have any comments?
I've got my own comment in regards to it, but in regards to what they're talking about, and I completely understand Beth's point about restricting the size. I do think what might be useful in something that's worth discussing is potentially putting it in the use table for dimensions, except potentially looking at each zone individually, because there might be some zones that might be of higher density, where we might even want to lessen the square footage of an accessory dwelling to even less than 900 or whatever, based on the density of the neighborhood that it's in.
Okay.
Whereas if we have some residential neighborhoods that are larger and they can afford a slightly larger unit, we should be able to kind of say, okay, in this zone it can go up to this, in this zone it can go up to that, in this zone it can go up to this, based on densities of those particular zones. That way at least it's in the table and it's not predefined to all of the zones that can be affected by these types of.
Okay.
So, it's on the same topic, so I don't.
So,
Maybe another topic of discussion.
Attorney Sorrell would like to make a comment.
I just want to bring to your attention, although you're probably aware of it, but the zoning was not initially enacted in virgin territory, nor has it been amended as such. So even though you may have the districts as Glenn's describing them, you may have had smaller homes built on smaller lots in the 60s or earlier before the zoning was tightened up. So you kind of have to take that into account as opposed to just looking at the districts and what's permitted now. Because you could have hypothetically something where it's half-acre zoning, but there's still small homes and somebody's planning something based on what you're suggesting now, it just doesn't fit in with their neighbor's property.
Another thing to think about. Hold on a second. Councilor Sheridan, do you have any comments? Kobe or Bruce, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I don't know why all of a sudden we're trying to reinvent the wheel. We've been, people have been getting second dwelling units in Franklin for probably almost close to 20 years now, probably longer. There's never been an issue. It's only been one person that I'm aware of that was turned down, and I can't even remember who it is. Gus reminds me of it every once in a while, but I don't even remember who it was. Probably because he didn't want to cooperate with the board at the time and he was probably trying to get something that probably shouldn't have been there, so that's why he didn't get it. You were right, Mark was right, you got zones, and I'll give you just an example, Skyline Estates. That's rural residential 1, it's been rezoned. I don't think any of those lots are bigger than 10 or 15,000 square feet. So if you're gonna, and they probably got small houses on them to begin with. You can do whatever you want with the size. I mean, if it's a zoning regulation and if people aren't happy with it, they can go to the ZBA and request a variance for size, dimensional relief. But I just, I think the whole thing, I mean, it's good that we're getting a definition of what an accessory dwelling unit is. We don't worry about the size. You want to put it in, go ahead. We talked about this before, and I don't think it's really necessary. But go ahead. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Kobe, do you have any comments?
I do, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Apologies for joining virtually today. All right, so just focusing on the definition. First of all, just to answer Bruce's question, it's true, and sort of under his direction, we've been very generous and work well with people who come forward with an accessory dwelling unit to date, but
Uh-oh.
every part of that process, sorry, can you hear me?
Well,
You're breaking up,
you're
Kobe.
breaking up.
You're spotty.
Can you hear us?
Okay, if you want to shoot to someone else, I can switch to a different platform.
Okay, all right. I'll get back to you. I know, Sam, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm going to apologize if you hear toddler screaming. Just sort of seconding what Bruce said, I think that the existing zoning setbacks and like lot area requirements and things like that will sort of give definition to what people can do, and that, you know, the need to define an actual size for an ADU is sort of superfluous. That's all.
Okay. Beth, you had your hand up again?
Are we still on the definition?
Yeah?
Just,
Because I think a lot of what's being said is things that I'd like to comment on, but it's, you know,
Well, it's,
different than the
it's,
definition, so.
well, it's because
Yeah.
you wanted
If
to
you
add,
wanna- If you want to take the size out, that's fine, put it like Brian suggested, if we go that route as a footnote, completely understand that rationale. I was just
Okay.
kind of going along the lines of what
The
the
state
state has
has.
in the definition, so.
right.
But not a problem where or how that's located, just was a comment on the definition. But as far as everyone else's comments, I will wait until we
Okay,
get to that.
all right. So besides that, then, I think everybody's okay with the definition?
no,
No?
one more thing.
Okay, all right.
I would just wanted to touch base on her comment.
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
Through you, Madam
ahead.
Chair, to Gus. Accessory dwelling units, one of the issues I have with the accessory dwelling units, and in this definition, I think it should include this, is that under the portion that says incorporated within the lawful principal single-family dwelling or within the detached building accessory to and on the same lot in ownership as a lawful principal single-family dwelling, it doesn't specifically state utilizing the same utilities, because if you're going to have another area that contains sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities, I think it should be noted that they share the same common utilities that the principal house shares, without separate metering, because the reason I state that is because if there is separate metering, it for all intents and purposes, by definition, would become an apartment, correct?
Correct. Through you, Madam Chair, we've always had that as a footnote in a ZBA decision when it comes to separate utilities. It's never been put into law, but it's a footnote as part of the decision. There's a lot to think about when it comes to separate utilities. Logistically, it may not work on a lot. If it gets put into law, so to speak, into a bylaw, are we going to get a lot of pushback on it? I like where you're going with it. I like to keep it that way, but will we get pushback?
Because I think what I would hate to see from this is that we continue on making further definitions that could expand upon it enough to the point where you're technically creating a separate apartment that maybe at the time that it was originally used, its purpose was as an accessory dwelling unit for family member or a relative or whatever, only to then, after that person moves out, rent that space out, which is not really what the intention is of this, if I'm correct.
If the ADUs are going to be for family members only, then you would have to put that in there as well. The way the definition reads now, if I'm correct, it's just that the principal owner has to reside on the property. So the definition isn't quite there with it having to be a relative.
Correct, correct. That was one of the things we talked about, to open up more housing, that it doesn't have to be a relative. But
But
then the water and the sewer is this.
Utilities.
But I would also agree with Glenn that logistically, it may be impossible to put separate utilities when you're building these ADUs.
Right.
Mm-hmm, right.
And that means that you've got a potential renter in there. And how is that going to work? I know a lot of apartments that you don't pay for utilities. It's bundled into your rent. It could go that way too, but that would be a private matter.
Okay. I do think the definition needs a little bit more clarification in regards to that. Well, I still have the floor. My issue is that the intentions are good. The intentions are good to allow livable space within the property, on a property, accessory dwelling, for the purposes of the principal house. But if it's brought to the point where it's a sleeping, cooking, and living sanitary location, where it has a separate meter, but the meter is actually part of the main utility, in other words, they just simply meter it just to kind of gauge how
Be a
much.
sub-panel, like you said.
Right, it's like a sub-panel to that. That's okay. I'm just concerned about them putting in separate utilities or requesting separate utilities for those types of places. Because then that would lead to an apartment, which is
We're trying to
not
keep,
the goal.
you're correct, we're trying to keep it as an ADU.
Right, thank you. I would just like to have that a little bit more.
Well, it's
clear
an
in
accessory
this definition.
dwelling. Okay. All right, so, Attorney Sorrell.
I don't see these as separate from apartments. I see these frankly as a specialized kind of apartment. Because it is being defined as a separate unit with separate entrance and exit, and everything's separate. The metering, particularly the town utilities, is the town's convenience to not have multiple meters and the expense and all that's involved in that part of it, as opposed to the private utilities. But I don't think it's an appropriate distinction, ADUs versus apartments. They actually are a specialized kind of apartment, separate dwelling unit, either within or on the same property as a primary residence.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, I wanna hear what other people think.
Patrick.
Kind of going along with that same point, like in Brighton, there's a lot of former two-family homes, and now three-family, because they made it, yeah, apartment.
Yeah.
Then they went, yeah, but they pay, well, the utilities,
For two, but they have a third as part of one.
yeah, and they split the cost of
split
it,
it.
yeah. Or they just put it as part of it, so,
A lot of
Okay.
ambiguity.
yeah.
Kobe, let's go back to you.
Take two. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let me know if you can't. Appreciate everything. Appreciate all the work and what's been said. I wanted to talk about two things as it relates to the definition. First, just a reminder of why ADUs are so important. They give us two main benefits. One is the introduction of new housing units, particularly smaller housing units that are particularly attractive for singles, elders, young professionals, like myself, to move into and have their first home, especially as it relates to the family, though not necessarily. The other main benefit is it often allows aging people in town or those who need money for some reason to rent out and have it be a supplemental form of income for them. Within the same confines, they can downsize, open up a new possibility. So both of those are main benefits of the ADUs. We want to encourage these. We want to make it easier to develop. That's why we're doing all of this. All right, as it relates to the definition, I agree with everything there. I don't think that we need to state the utility thing, but I agree that almost every single one will be the shared same utility. We don't need a separate utility. But I don't know why we state that it has to be incorporated into a single family dwelling. I think if the lot allows for what currently is a duplex to still have space for an accessory dwelling unit, I don't see why we should care about that. Exactly what Patrick just said. If there's a potential three house and it becomes a duplex and you rent out the third, that seems like something that's as beneficial as adding on an ADU to a single family. So I would just remove that from the definition. Otherwise, fully supported as is.
Okay, thank you, Kobe. Jamie's going to take that, I think.
Through you, Madam Chair. So if Gus will explain this a little bit further, but the question I have for him is, under Kobe's scenario, if you had a 5-acre lot, 10-acre lot, 20-acre lot, you know, now you're getting into like second homes, third homes. You're into a different set of regulations than that. I think I would look to Gus, which is what I was just kind of asking him for clarity. How would that be done? To Kobe's question, which is a very good one, and I think a lot of people are going to ask that question for sure, and it's a
Well,
good one.
I don't think that was his question. I thought it was like, if there's a two-family and it has a garage, why can't the garage become an ADU,
If it's not attached.
right?
No,
I think,
it's
is,
a two-family.
Kobe, is that, was
Oh,
that
it's
your
a
question?
two-family.
This says single family.
Yeah, exactly, yep.
Oh, I see, if
Oh,
it's
it's
a
a
duplex.
single family.
Okay, I got it.
Single-family dwelling.
My apologies.
That's not etched in stone. You could change that.
Right, I think that's what he meant.
I got it. I got it.
Right?
I mean, I
Yeah,
think-
so it would still be a single additional unit, but we don't care what the principal use is, right? That regardless of the original building, we're still saying you can add one more. You know, if you have a basement or a shed or a garage, I don't care if it's on a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex. If you have the space to add a housing unit, all power to you.
Gus?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think the definition could be modified. I think Kobe's onto something there. The way the definition reads is incorporated into a single-family dwelling. We're putting it under the two-family guise in the use regulations. So I think that if it's an ADU, that building would still stay a two-family, unless Attorney Sorrell disagrees with me. So that could be modified to satisfy where we want to go with this.
Mark?
There's no right or wrong, but it clearly would have to be addressed in terms of definitions to coordinate what your intent is. Are you talking about, what type of primary, whether it's a single family? Single family is easy to allow the accessory. Once you get beyond that point, it can be done, but not as easily. And then you get into distinguishing. It's almost a no-brainer if it's a single family and and the district allows as of right single or two families. It almost doesn't matter because the two-family could be any size because it's allowed.
Right.
It could be accessory, it could be a full-size second family because it's allowed. When it's not allowed and you're pushing to have additional housing, that's where you're getting into the need to define.
Patrick?
So I think that'd probably cover the two-family area that could now have three families, so that'd kind of cover it, wouldn't it?
Well, I understand it as being kind of within the same building. So you have a
Right.
two-family, or you build a two-family or a three-family.
But the
It's not a two-family with an
Right.
accessory dwelling. I think of this as kind of a detached accessory dwelling unit thing. You know, when you have something on,
On a garage or something.
yeah.
I think most of these two families in town wouldn't have that issue. I don't think they have detached garages for the most part in that area.
But I think that's what Kobe meant, but
And
Gus, you're gonna, oh, sorry, Patrick. You're
That's a
done?
question, so,
Yeah.
in theory, could the owner move into the accessory dwelling and rent
Yeah.
the other part?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Particularly with an older
Right.
person, that's very common.
Gus?
I think you can, like I said, modify that definition to everyone's liking, and if it gets voted on that way, that you have a two-family in existence on A Street, let's say, and you want to put an ADU on it. I personally don't have a problem with adding that third unit. However, the building code kicks in sprinklers, so that stops a lot of people from
Right.
moving forward because of the cost of it.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a detached structure, most of our, and I'm going off line a little bit here, most of our detached structures out there start out life as a garage. And then not a lot of them in town, but a few of them have actually had in-laws put in, and it works out quite well. To build from scratch an in-law that's, or I'm sorry, an ADU. If you build an ADU that's right on the property line to your neighbor and it starts out as that second dwelling unit, you want to be very cautious about how you implement setbacks. I feel, that's my opinion.
But like that, I guess one of the things here is if we talk just about the definition, right? I know Bruce has his hand up, but I think like the setbacks and everything we'll talk about, right? So if we said just a principal family dwelling unit, a principal, not single, right, dwelling unit, then like Bruce would hear it, and then it would, or if it was went into a 3, then you would be able to look at the design of it, right, to make sure it was okay. The setbacks would come in to play, right, and so that kind of like takes care of everything that people are worried about, I think.
I believe so. And-
Okay.
And the other.
I just want to make sure I'm on the right page here.
I want to make one other comment. I think I echo everyone's sentiments about the proportionate and the density part of how we move forward on all of this, because, again, accessory buildings, not ADUs, not in-laws, can be built within 10 feet of the property line. And I see Beth shaking her head, yes. She knows exactly what I'm talking about. And when a garage starts out life 10 feet away from a property line, it's not a big deal usually. But
Right.
we're talking about possibly making a bylaw that creates a potential 30 by 30 building, and be very cautious about how we proceed about where we put the setbacks for the density and so forth, just to make sure that we're getting it right the first time. You don't want to introduce something that becomes a zoning nightmare.
That's why we have so much fun here. Okay, thank you for that, Gus. I'm going to go to Bruce first. He's had his hand up. Bruce?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 3 things I got, because the more we bounce around like a ping pong ball, we just talk about other things. Back to the utilities, when we make a decision, we usually require that they have a single utility or a common utility that goes through the house first, and then adds on to the, the accessory dwelling unit. The other question I got is, I suppose I can ask the building commissioner, is a condo considered a single-family dwelling if there's a double condo or triple condo that people own it individually?
It is considered a single-family dwelling unit.
Okay, so there you go. Now, if every one of those single-family units can have an ADU, now you're going to have a building where there was 3 units. Now you're going to have a building with 6 units, or possibly have a building with 6 units.
Bruce?
That's just something to contemplate. Yes.
Hold on. Attorney Sorrell has a rebuttal.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think that, not to speak for you, but I'm not sure the building commissioner fully understood what you were asking. An individual condominium unit is part of a multifamily complex. It's multifamily it's ownership of multifamily versus rental of multifamily, but it's multifamily.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I'm looking at the building code point of view.
Right, I was just gonna say
Attorney
that,
Sorrell
when
is
you're
looking
dealing with the state and how he does his reporting to the state on housing units, it is a single family, even if it's
Right.
30
Right.
condos, it's
Okay.
30 single
They
family.
wouldn't be able to put
But
it.
as far as our zoning, it is a multifamily, not a single family unit.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, just a possibility that was thrown out there, that if you had a 3 building, somebody could argue that you could get 3 accessory dwellings on that to attach. Whether they were 3 single condominiums that were attached to the garage, maybe somebody would want to do the garage over, and then the one guy gets the idea, the other guy, now you got 6 units where you had 3. And I was going to mention that Gus brought out that, when accessory dwelling are approved, like he said, most of them most accessory dwellings start out as a garage or a shed, or a pool house or something like that need relief, or they can be built by right as long as they keep the right setback. But he's right. I mean, if it starts as a pool house and then turns into an ADU, or it starts as a garage, a 2-car garage, and all of a sudden it's an ADU, he's absolutely right that that's going to bring up a lot of problems with neighbors who, thought that they were, when they saw the garage going up 20 years ago, it was going to stay a garage, and now all of a sudden it's another unit. But just something to contemplate.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. Attorney Searle, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think that personally, and this is kind of what an intersection of law and planning overlaps, and there's policy decisions to make, but I think the accessory unit is always conceptually smaller than the full size, whatever it is. And I have no problem really with a 2-family also allowing a little bit more, which gives you like less than a 3-family, but an extra unit or extra income, or the rationales that Kobe was citing.
Right.
And perhaps even go so far as a 3-family also allowing it on the same rationale, but I would, in my opinion, that would be it. I would not allow it beyond that. You're clearly into multifamily housing after that.
Yes, that's what I was thinking, as we were talking about multifamilies and adding another unit. But thank you for that, Attorney Searle. So, Beth,
Sure.
Yeah, you had.
this is good, everybody has questions. Go ahead, Beth.
I'm a little torn on changing the definition to include more than just single families.
Okay.
So I think the intent here was for our discussion was to talk about single families and how that works, and when you're looking at multiple zones, and all the setbacks, to me, that is a big red flag. And my comfortableness, just me, not talking about everybody else, but how comfortable I am with saying that this is a great idea. Because I think it's a great idea, but I think it's a great idea for single families, whether they're attached or detached. When you're moving it along to a 2-family or a 3-family, I think that really changes how we're looking at the accessory dwellings. So I do have an issue with changing it to be kind of a blank statement in the definition to, be more than just single families. And since, I have to say that, Bruce, I don't often agree with you, but I am agreeing with you on something right now. This is pretty rare.
Write it down, Bruce.
Yeah, the world's
First of
changing.
March.
It's on the record.
It's really recorded, it's
Yeah,
okay.
I think that
April Fools.
when you
That's next year. That's next year.
a month early. When you are looking down the line here, and I know, Gus, you alluded to it as well, you're starting out with something that is a pool house or a garage, and then you're turning into somewhere where somebody lives. That's completely different. And when we have this list here on one of our pages here about setbacks that apply for buildings that are structures unless otherwise regulated, to me, that is great for garages. That's not great for when somebody's living. I can think of some lots that I took a look at, the single family for. You look at those lots, a lot of them are really undersized, and if we're going to allow an accessory dwelling, you can go and get 10 feet from your sideline and the house is right on top of you, which was a garage. Or you're building a new detached structure. Last thing I'm gonna be honest is I want is to look out my window and see somebody's accessory dwelling unit now 10 feet off my property line. So I think in looking these, 1 through 5 of 185-19B, we need to look at that more from an accessory dwelling unit, not a garage.
Not just a garage.
Yeah.
All right. Greg?
I agree with Beth in terms of this being strictly for single-family setup. We get into the 2-family, 3-family, put an accessory dwelling unit on a 3-family or 2-family, you're triggering 2 more cars on that property. Now you potentially have 6 cars. Now you could have potential parking problem, safety problem. So you gotta be really careful with that. People could park on the street. It just opens up a whole can of worms. I think we specifically stick with the single-family, assembly. Like Bruce said, I mean, it's been working for so many years, it's been good. We put the notations in it. I mean, we tweak it a little bit, but I don't think we should change it that substantially. I think we're gonna, like Gus said, we're gonna create some wave down the street that we're not aware of until somebody approaches it and catches us with it, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Greg. I'm going to go back to Kobe and then to Glenn. Kobe?
Yes, thank you. All right, a few things. One is it's going to be very easy in all of these conversations to talk about all the potential problems of adding a new housing unit, right? That's the easy part. We as a town have to do the hard part of recognizing that we have more expenses than we currently bring in revenue. And we need to add revenue. We also need to wrestle with the difficult fact that many people are struggling to afford units, including longtime residents or our own children. It's on us to find possibilities, right? If we say no to large multifamily complexes, if we say no to 3 families around the downtown, and now we say no to adding 1 more if you have 2 and you have plenty of space, then where is the new revenue going to come from? Where are the new housing units going to come from? We need to have responses. I do think that this single family, I shot these to someone, Christine Madore with the Mass Housing Partnership, who's a longtime housing expert and planning expert. And this was her biggest sticking point in reviewing our proposal. I'll just quote her. Why only limit to single family dwellings? An ADU is an accessory use to a principal existing one allowed in certain districts, not associated with the type of building. For example, in your GR5 district, both single and 2 families are allowed, but you're suggesting only one family homes are allowed to build an ADU. What's the difference? Limiting this to a one family only also creates equity issues in that they only benefit the wealthiest homeowners in town who are owning the single family homes. It just seems we can deal with lot size, we can deal with setbacks. If there's space on a property to add accessory dwelling unit, I don't see why we should care what the principal use is.
Okay, thank you. Patrick?
Point of clarification, but now we're allowing 3 families in that 2-family area, correct? Oh, that's the proposal, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
So-
I mean, it hasn't passed yet.
Right, but, so in theory.
Wink, wink.
It hasn't.
Hasn't
Right.
passed yet.
Nice job.
Right, but in
Right,
theory,
so-
if that passed, you could add a dwelling and that would just be making it a 3-family, and that's allowed, right? In 2-family area?
It's not through an accessory dwelling unit, though.
Exactly.
Right, it's in the primary
It has to be
building.
built, okay. Okay, so you couldn't make it.
Right, Gus?
Right, Gus.
Did I get it right,
So-
Gus?
The question is, there has to be a primary structure there already.
Right,
Okay, yes,
So
that's
could-
true.
and if that passes, could a 2-family be made into a 3-family?
Could a 2-family remain?
Be made into a 3-family on the, if it's the same dwelling?
It depends on the zone. Multis, that would turn, I mean, I know we're in the middle of going through the inclusionary zoning. Specifically, it's all gonna be listed by zone, and I had alluded to earlier that right now, the definition says single family. I
Right.
get that that may need to be looked at.
But my question is that when they change the zone, if we change the zone to allow 3 families, could a current 2-family then be made into a 3-family? Or
A conversion from a
Yes.
2-family to a 3-family.
if it's-
I think that the
okay.
answer is yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I mean,
Yes.
building code wise, and I don't know that zoning would come into play if it's been implemented.
Okay.
So.
Glenn?
Thank you, ma'am. I have to, I kind of have to spiral all this back to the beginning for a minute. In Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong.
I will.
We have been, we as a town currently allow accessory dwelling units, correct?
We
do,
we
not by
allow,
right.
it's an in-law, which is under the guise right now of a, accessory, sorry, look it up. Under a two-family as far as a conversion.
Okay. And it meets basically the same requirements as an ADU by definition.
Is there anything written right now about in-laws? The answer is no.
Okay.
So your question is a little bit complicated to
Yep.
answer. I think we're headed in a direction where it's gonna give us what we presently don't have. Like Bruce had alluded to, it works right now. One person's been turned down in the 25 years that I've been here with that conversion from it's under the guise of a two-family once they achieve that conversion. Go a little bit further, I don't think we've ever had a multifamily more than two-family go to a third unit of an in-law, if
Okay.
I'm making sense.
I was just gonna ask you that.
Explaining. We have, I don't, Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've ever done that. It's always been from a single family to an in-law, which is really a conversion of, under the two-family guys, under the bylaw.
If I'm not mistaken, Gus, if I'm not mistaken, we had one down on Fisher Street. There was I think it was a condo unit or a duplex that somebody requested. And I don't even remember what we did with it, whether they withdrew or we just didn't approve it or what, but.
I do remember that one. Far and few between, but it's a special permit, it goes in front of the board, and as will, the way the potential new bylaw reads, it'll still go for a special permit in some zones.
In some zones. I'm almost done. So it's pretty clear, based on that discussion, that we undoubtedly need a clear definition, at least to try to meet the needs of this type of request for a dwelling unit. But one thing I'm not really 100% clear on is why we're currently trying to veer away from our current process, if it already works. Because it's kind of a as requested type of situation. So when these come up, when requests come in for an accessory dwelling type unit such as an in-law, it currently goes to the ZBA, if I'm correct, for that review, and they look at all of the setbacks, they look at the principal structure, they look at the overall use of the space, they ultimately determine the size of the space, and they ultimately determine the utilization of the space with the intention that that space ultimately goes back to the principal building. Once that in-law / accessory dwelling unit is vacated, it isn't meant to be left over as a secondary dwelling unit for the purposes of rental or any other type of profitable purposes.
It's 100% right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. I think one of the things that, through the Franklin for All project, one of our recommendations was to add a definition of an accessory dwelling unit
I agree with.
and to make it a little bit easier for people, so people will know what the process is. Make it easier for the process, right?
Absolutely.
Remove some of, I know we love our planning board and our ZBA people, but make it a little bit easier for people to get this stuff done. And also, not make it so that it has to be a family a person from the family, that it could be someone else could live there. And so that is what is before us right now. Is that right, Gus?
That's
And so
100%.
that's what we are trying to do, and that's why it's in front of us. It's as Kobe said, to include, to increase our density just a little bit and to add revenue, but also to add houses. So that's why we were
I
talking
guess,
about it.
I guess it's the revenue part that I don't quite understand, because if the goal is to add a dwelling unit in order to allow for family members, friends, or whoever to occupy a space, I just, then for all intents and purposes, it becomes a rental unit. Because if
Yeah.
you're charging rent for a space, it's not necessarily a dwelling for the purposes of somebody have someplace to live. They're renting it out as if it were an apartment.
Yes.
So why
Yeah.
even bother calling it an accessory dwelling unit, and just call it an apartment?
Because
For what it is. I mean, that's just, I mean, I know it's semantics, but I was just having this discussion with my apprentices today in regards to definitions. If you change a definition, or you're trying to update a definition, we can't be ambiguous in regards to the definition, because we need to clearly state the purpose, its use, its intended use, and ultimately what its future use is going to be in the definition.
That's
And
what they did.
And so that, this is, it's called an accessory dwelling because it's not the primary use. We already have a primary dwelling unit on it.
not gonna be as
And
big.
so you have to remember, this is the accessory, this is only accessory use only, right, Gus? Gus is looking at me like, and I see Beth's hand. I see your hand, Beth.
Subordinate's a great word, too.
Yeah. Beth, and then I'm gonna go back to Kobe.
A couple different things. So I guess first, understanding if we do have a process that works today, great. However, I don't know what that process is. When I'm looking in this zoning bylaw, there's nothing to me that says what to do to go to the ZBA and what I'm going to be reviewed on. And to me, that's important as a reason why we're, as Bruce calls it, recreating the wheel. I want to know what I'm up against. Just like everyone always says to the planning board, we don't know what you guys want. Well, let's say and be specific with the ZBA on what people can expect when they're going to the ZBA if they want an accessory dwelling unit. And my other
I can
point-
answer that.
So, I'm not quite done yet, but. my
Beth
other
still has the
point
floor.
Is that I strongly disagree with having it to be requirement of a family member. And who are we as a community to define what a family member is? I really don't agree with that.
It's not in there.
But right now, this is what I'm saying,
Yeah.
in the
Yes.
current process, my understanding is when you go, you're told it has to be a family member. So that is one of my issues with current process. So I do not want to see in the future having an accessory dwelling unit that has to be dedicated to a family member. And whether we consider it a rental unit or not, I don't really care, just saying that, so.
Thank you, Beth. I think, I think that's one of the reasons, that's the whole point. So if the process works, we have to actually document the process, because it's not documented anywhere. And, you know, we're not all gonna be here forever, so let's make sure it's there, here for the next generation of people.
Bruce has been here long enough.
But, so what, I think I was gonna go to Kobe, right? Did I say Kobe?
I think
It's
Gus
a-
had something.
Gus wants to say
Jamie.
something.
We have a definition now as what a family definition is. And Beth, if you remember, you actually were creating the bylaw at one point to get the in-law written somewhere, but it kind of fell.
Never happened, yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of fell by the wayside. And I think I gave Amy the paperwork too the other day. So it's,
So-
there was a lot, my point is Beth did a lot of hard work to try to get that created too.
Right. Okay. All right, so, I think Kobe had his hand up before Bruce did again, so I'm gonna go to Kobe again.
Yeah, thank you. I want to stop on this idea of the process that we have works. I don't want to take that for granted. the process that we have works for protecting neighbors from potential housing units. It does not work for actually providing affordable housing options for residents of Franklin or potential residents of Franklin. I really appreciate what Beth said about knowing what you're up against. I would push it one step further. If now's the time that we get to say, hey, here's, if you are to build an accessory dwelling unit, you need to have it be, this far set back, you need this size, all of that. We get to say that now. If you have a project that meets all of those, I don't want you to be up against anything. I don't want you to have to go and take any risk or pay for a lawyer or pay for an extra engineer every time you get in front of the ZBA. Who knows, the next Bruce might be particularly grumpy on certain days or like to push things off to I just don't want to push any of that forward. This is a way to invite small incremental housing units, one at a time in places that already exist where they have to deal with the primary owners. It's the best way that we can add housing units and revenue to town. I don't want to make that any harder.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Bruce.
Okay, just to clarify a couple of things. Nobody comes directly to the ZBA to ask for anything. There's a process in place. We don't accept any applications unless there's a written comment from the building commission. In other words, somebody comes into town, I want to build an ADU or an in-law apartment. They're going to find out what they need to do from the building commissioner, who in Franklin is the zoning enforcement officer, and I think he does a very good job of it. He'll write a decision that they'll get, and then it usually is accompanied, it's usually sent to the ZBA, so that then when they got to apply, they apply. There's a clear set of things of what they got to do. As far as somebody hiring an attorney, not everybody that comes before the ZBA hires an attorney. You're definitely going to need an engineer because at the least amount of documentation that we need to know where your lot is and where that dwelling sits on the lot. And if they're going to put an addition on the house, or they're going to go into the accessory dwelling unit, or the accessory dwelling that's there, say a garage, we want to make sure that that garage meets, the setbacks as required today. Not all of them do, because they've been in the ground for a long time, and now all of a sudden somebody wants to change it into a thing. As far as the requirement that we make it a family member, and that's just, it's just easy. It's easy for the town, it's easy for the building commissioner to know who's living there, and you would hope that family members would have a little bit more consideration for the neighbors that have been there than it's just somebody coming in to try to get a less expensive unit to live in. That's about it. So, and Gus, if I said anything wrong, you can correct me.
I liked it.
I'm going to go to Greg, and then I'm going to go to Patrick. Greg?
I just want to make one point. I don't think this should be inclusive of trying to make money for the town. This isn't a financial burden that should be brought to this for ADUs to try to generate revenue for the town. The town's got enough money coming in. It's a matter of tightening the belt once in a while and doing it that way. I don't want this to become a revenue generating situation for the housing. We have enough housing, it's still coming, it's on the books, we have a lot more coming. We just don't want that to be part of the driving train, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Patrick?
Yeah, as far as the family members, I don't think that's a big deal because you're living so close. As long as you make sure that the people who live in the house, the owners, you're living so close to whoever they rent it to or that they have come in. They're not going to have, they're going to be living essentially in the same house. So if they're friends or they're going to get references. I guess one question I have now, is it still the case that it goes back to being a single family if that people, they leave? Because if it doesn't have to be family members, nobody's going to, it'd be very easy to find somebody else to move in.
Correct. I don't know what the intention is, Gus.
The intention of
Once the person leaves, does it go back to this?
it's the way it's presented to the registry of deeds as well. So if that family member moves out,
But it might not be a family member now, so.
if it was, at this point, well, if the ADU was to
Yeah.
go through the way we're talking now, if it wasn't a family member, then anybody could move in there, if that,
Okay.
if that
Yeah,
answers the
okay,
question.
yeah, okay.
If
I
that's
think
how,
that
the-
answers your question, right?
if
You
that's
want- I
how the
think- I
bylaw is
think-
written.
I think you want to make sure, you're asking if it's permanent,
Yes.
right? The ADU would be permanent,
Good point.
right?
I thought
I
when
think-
it
I-
sells,
I
it
think-
has to come back to ZBA to get pre-approved again.
Currently, the way it is,
Okay.
but I think with Patrick's answer, once it's on the deed that there's another house on that property, then it stays that way.
And I think if it's not a family member, then it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
So that would, it would mean it would stay.
Yeah.
That's how I would interpret that,
That's-
Greg.
If that's the direction we're headed in, then it would not
Yeah.
matter.
I'm going to go to Beth.
Yeah, just, reiterate, why do we need to know who's living there? Why is that for an accessory dwelling unit? We don't know who's living in a two-family that moves in, you convert two-family, you don't ask them to register who's living next door. I mean, it's just, I don't understand that point. It just doesn't make any sense to me, why we care who's living there. It's a unit for somebody to move into, and that's why I think putting a size limit on it would be very helpful, because you're not creating a significantly large unit. You're just a small space with the intent of, the unit is for starting out family, your old neighbor friend that needs to move in and live somewhere, or a college student that's just graduating that has student loans that needs to live at home. The point isn't to, make these gigantic, significant units that are going to become apartments for 6 or 7 people to live in. It's an accessory dwelling unit. So why do we care who is there?
I agree with, everybody's saying, I agree. Okay, so I think, Bruce, do you still have your hand up, or you're?
Yeah, no, I was just going to explain that the decision, we take names, we put the names of the people that are planning to live in those, in the main house and in the accessory dwelling unit. So that if anything happens to either one of them, because of the way we're doing it now, they're family members. So that's the only way that the zoning enforcement officer can govern, is by, if he goes in there and, say the neighbors, say something happens, somebody's father-in-law or somebody moves in there and he decides to pack up and go to Florida. And all of a sudden they got this extra unit, so they rent it out to a bunch of people that may be going to college or whatever. And all of a sudden there's a ruckus. Well, if somebody complains, if a neighbor complains, then the zoning enforcement agent can go bang on the door and he can say, hey, who's living here now? And then if they show him that, the person that was approved to live there isn't there anymore, then he can issue him a zoning violation. It's just it's like an enforcement tool. I guess you could look at it that way. But if you don't care who lives in everywhere, and as I can see in this thing here, you got them in R1, R2, R3, R4, R5. If you don't care who's living next door and everybody's going to put an apartment in their house, then so be it. But, they still need, and I'm not even sure why you got a special permit from the Board of Appeals. What difference does it make that? That's why we give, we call them accessory dwelling units when we're doing it, accessory. We don't call them in-law apartments because we don't have that definition, but in fact, that's what we're doing. That's what we're approving. And up to this point, I don't think there's been any problems. And there wouldn't be any problems if you didn't take names either. If you just want to rent them to anybody, go ahead. I'm sure that all the neighbors in the neighborhood aren't going to be happy about it, but if that's what you determine to let them do, then go ahead. But anyway, that's just how it works right now. That's what I'm telling you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. I think we still know who owns the building, though. And so the principal owner is still there. And so there's still someone that we can go knock on a door in case there's a ruckus or if there's something wrong there. But I don't think we should be afraid of that. I think we can, I think the people that own the building, who own the accessory dwelling unit, can make sure that there's someone there that's respectful, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Oh, Patrick, you had, no,
Agreed.
Glenn?
Yeah, just a quick point, again, back to the definition. I have to go back to agreeing with Beth in regards to the size limitations, and that we should definitely put that in the table. And as far as the definition is concerned with single family, I think that should remain a single family. We can always look at this down the road later on.
Thank you.
If this continues to become a popular thing to do. But I think we should limit it to single family at the moment until they see, I mean, we have to start somewhere. I don't think we should start big, I think we should start small.
Gus, how many ADUs get built, or in-laws now get built a year?
I would guess we have at least 8 per year.
Okay.
Bruce, would you agree with that?
Somewhere around there. I don't have the exact number. I don't keep track of it.
Okay, all right, thanks. Beth? No?
I'm trying to remember what I was gonna say. Oh, Bruce's comment about why even send them to zoning board for a special permit, because I still think you need to look at, the setbacks and the other points that are in our recommendations here.
That could be held very easy. That could be done very easily by the zoning enforcement agent or the building inspector. He can look and see if the setbacks are correct. He can do it, that's the only reason why we do it now. It's not even in the books, but we grant, the second dwelling unit because people are coming in, they want their family members to have a place to live. But if you don't care who lives there, I'm sure that Gus is more than capable to decide if the setbacks are proper.
Can I ask for clarification?
Yes, hold on a second, Bruce.
Bruce, what do you mean, because it's not even on the books? Could you clarify on that one? What do you mean by that? What's not on
Well,
the
in-law
books?
apartments, they're not on the books.
I'm sorry, what was that?
But if somebody's looking for a second dwelling unit, if somebody's looking for a second dwelling unit, it's been the norm for the last 25 years that it's for an in-law that's going in there. For an in-law that's gonna live there.
So I guess that's my reason for why we want to put it on the books. It's not technically on the books.
Now I'm confused.
But what do you think, I'm just curious.
Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
His point about not having to go through the board because it's got just the building inspector can do it.
Building commissioner.
I mean, through the chair, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Beth.
I think that if you're going to look at it in close detail and put some size restrictions and things to that extent, if we're doing it by right,
Should be the right.
then my personal opinion is why can't Gus do it? I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
But in its current state,
There's nothing
that's
right.
not what we're talking about, so.
Okay, all right, so I think what you're talking about is if, in its current state, it doesn't have to go to the zoning board of appeals, so why does it go there?
No,
Is that what, I think that's what Bruce said, but that's kind of how if all the setbacks are okay, is that what you mean?
I guess, to Bruce's point, is saying it's not currently on the books, right, because it's by conversion, or is that kind of what you're considering? And this is the problem I had years ago when looking at this, is.
I think I get it.
Yeah.
I think I
Do you
get
see
it.
what
So
I'm
like,
saying?
so now
Yes.
if we put it on the books,
Yes.
then it should be, then people will know it's there, which is what we want,
Yes.
right? And then people will know what the process is, which is what we want.
Then people, which is what we want.
Okay,
right? And
Kobe,
then people will know that 50 is what,
Oh,
then people will, this is what we want.
I think somebody was unmuted.
Yeah.
Kobe?
Yes, thank you. So this all brings me back. I'm okay with size restrictions. She gave us a recommendation, no more than 900 square feet and no more than 50% of gross floor area. So if you have a particularly small unit in the beginning, then even if you have a less than 1,800 square foot, then you should still be capped at 50%. I'm okay with all of that. The idea is that it's an accessory piece. One thing that I wanted to note, we didn't quite get there, and I know that we're ending our conversation. I was focused specifically on the definition, but related is it feels weird to put it under principal uses in the use schedule table at all. She pointed this out, and it was entirely matched my thinking, where the whole thing is that we're laying out the principal uses, and then we're saying on the side, in a separate space, and you can have a note there, we're saying in a separate thing, hey, here's where other principal uses are. If you want to add an accessory dwelling unit, that's a separate thing. Again, we don't care what your principal use is, as long as you meet these requirements for what we allow for an accessory dwelling.
Yeah, I think well, maybe it should be in the accessory use table instead? Is that, was that what Kobe,
I think Gus wanted to respond.
Gus?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have it under principal uses now. I think Brian is gonna put that, I would think, either in 185-19, which deals with our accessory uses, or it may stay in the principal uses. I don't know where we're headed with that yet.
It's another thing to think about, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is called an accessory dwelling unit, and we have a section, I don't know if it's 185-19 or 18. I think it's 19.
19.
Yeah.
Brian?
I'd like to try to, you don't have a lot of time, but try to go through a few things quickly and clarify a couple of things. As far as the last thing we just discussed, the accessory dwelling unit in attachment, the 185 attachment 7, it is an accessory use, so we could either put it there or the accessory table or both. I'm saying the same thing if we're going to put it in both, but when we go to update them, we want to make sure we actually change them both. That's the problem with putting things in two places. Right? So one or the other is probably better. You might want to put a note in here for accessory dwelling units, see 185, whatever, the other table. But regardless, we can clarify something like that, right? So currently it's family only. If we're getting away from that, you would be getting away from having a deed restriction and all of those other things that you're dealing with right now. But it still, of course, would be a special permit. You'd have to go through the special permit process. You would have to meet certain guidelines. The last page in this handout are the special permit findings. If you find that it meets all these things here, then they can have their special permit. I don't know if ZBA goes through that process, because I've never seen a voting on an ADU in the past or whatever, but essentially, you go through all the findings, you get yes, go all the way through, they get their special permit. It has to go to the, because it's a special permit, it has to go to the registry in that nature, but it doesn't go as a family-only situation if what we're proposing. So as far as the definition, I think we could probably, as far as I was thinking about one thing, all right. If you create a 3-family, you're created a multifamily by state law, really, essentially, okay?
Yes.
So,
Right.
You get to that point there, then,
Triggers.
you have a commercial use.
Yeah, triggers.
So that would probably more begin to, at least traditionally, the way the town's been doing things, go to the planning board and things of that nature for a 3-family or 4-family, multifamily type of thing. So I think that you might want to write in the accessory dwelling unit definition, incorporate it into a lawful principal single-family dwelling or one unit of a 2-family structure or within a detached unit. So you end up with, say somebody has a 2-family, one up and one down. They want to add to the first floor a little addition so they can have an accessory unit there. Probably nothing wrong with that as long as they have enough land to do so, right? So that would allow, just by tweaking the words there, would allow adding that accessory to a 2-family.
Okay. What did you just?
If they're condos, it wouldn't work because you're talking multifamily,
multifamily,
and you're
right.
talking commercial use.
Right.
So, and as far as the size, the floor area size, if you have a single family that's a 5,000 square foot thing, obviously you can't have up to 50%. They're accessory units, so you have to limit the size of it. If it's but if on the other end, if you have a 1,000 square foot home, 50% being 500, you really, that would be your maximum situation. You're almost, it's hard to get 2 units inside that 1,000 square feet to begin with. So you're probably gonna be putting an addition or something on it, right? So 500 to 900 is a range that makes sense, I think. And that is, as Beth was saying, it's actually in the state guidance and the definition. There are a few things. 185-19B, that's where you're talking about accessory structures. On page 4 at the top here, the 5 different issues there. ADUs are a little bit different, obviously, than what we're talking about here. An ADU, if it's going to be a standalone structure, it shouldn't be 10 feet away from the property line. It should have the same basic setbacks as the regular primary use, in my opinion. But, so we could add an additional subsection in this area here related to ADUs, to talk about that specifically. As far as the utilities, right now, as a policy, the town does, it doesn't like separate utilities, and it doesn't go there. But what happens in a case that you don't have any choice? If you're gonna put this, you're gonna feed this additional ADU, and you can't go through the building, whatever the case may be. There has to be a way to waive that requirement. So I would recommend putting into this ADU section of 19B an additional bullet on utilities, but also giving the ZBA or the authority, the special permitting authority, the ability to waive that requirement if it can be proved that's not necessary. The size of the unit, the lot size, we've talked about that a couple of times in the past, where if you have a minimum size lot and you're already maxing it out, what should we be adding in? Okay, that needs to have an additional 25% of the lot area to get an ADU in there. We don't have time to talk about it right now, but that's something we might want to think about. Do we want to limit the number of bedrooms? That's another thing we can talk about if you'd like to in the future. And I guess that's basically, I think that's all I had here, but I think we could come back whenever you want to have your next meeting with a little bit restructured on the definition.
Okay.
We can come in with a couple ideas on some other things, maybe even a subsection under 185-19B related into that area. So we could just, continue on with the issue next time around if you like.
Thank you for your thoughts, Brian. I see Greg has his hand up. Kobe just had his thumb up. That means he's good with that.
Okay.
I just have one quick question, and it's either to Gus or Bruce. How many detached accessory dwelling units do we have in town right now?
I could probably answer that, Greg. I don't think we have more than 5 in town. And most of them are in the rural areas as well. We don't get a lot of it, whether it's inside the home or outside the home. We don't get a lot in the urban areas. It's just not commonplace. You already have multifamilies in the downtown area, so it makes sense that we don't get a lot.
And that was just gonna be the second part of the utilities that we've been talking about, separate utilities and whatnot. When Brian was alluding, if you can't get utilities from one house, say the service isn't large enough, electric service isn't large
Right.
enough, you'll run to underground from the house to the addition, or off the transformer, off a handhold from the street, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just curious on how many were out there, that's all.
This should just be public utilities, water and sewer.
Right.
We don't care about electricity and gas, that's not our business.
No, but I'm just thinking the metering, if it becoming an apartment now, because now you have separate meters for that
Right.
detached
And I've got issues,
building.
I've got issues with that.
That's where I'm agreeing with Glenn on that. Because now you're entertaining a second family on
Yep.
a single-family lot.
Throw one more, through you, Madam Chair, throw
Okay,
one more
Gus.
caveat into this. We have many houses in town that are on septic, private septic systems. And to be honest with you, there's regulations through the health department that don't allow for more than so many bedrooms, depending on the square footage and a couple other regulations. So it pulls back a little bit
But if you're on town sewer, you're
on
all
what we're
over-
talking about in those zones, but
Yeah.
just want to add that.
Yeah,
Right.
that's my only fear of it, that's all. Thank you, Gus.
Thank you, Greg.
I was gonna say motion to adjourn.
Well, I'm not gonna call him Brad. I was gonna call you Brad, Bruce, just for fun.
Yeah, thanks.
I had to do it once. Bruce,
I had to pay her $5, but it's worth it.
Yeah. We already have that condition in there. You know, it's, we like common utilities, but it's based upon the decision from the DPW and the Water and Sewer Department, whether they have new services or separate services to those units. Because sometimes they just can't be made to go through the other house and out. So like Greg said, it's up to the DPW at that point. You know, we have that caveat in the decisions already.
okay, thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Brian, Amy, and Gus. I think we've probably talked about the definition a lot tonight. I think you guys probably know what we're all thinking we need to have added to it, right? I mean, basically, we really like it a lot. It seems like everybody agrees. There's just a couple of things to add, and the next time we'll talk about it. And then we'll talk about sizes and stuff, right? You guys? Yeah?
Yep,
Okay?
good.
And with that, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. So done.
I have a second. Bruce?
Yes?
Kobe?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Chair says yes. Good night, everyone.